Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar today, How to Empower Citizen Developers in a Controlled Environment. My name is Niamh Lordan and I'm the Head of Marketing here at Flowforma, the host of today's webinar. So thanks for joining us. So before we get started, I would just like to take care of some housekeeping and give you a few pointers for viewing today's webinar. So just a short note to say this webinar is being recorded. If you need any assistance during the webinar, please email info@flowforma.com if you need any support. Your lines are muted, but I highly encourage you to ask any questions in the chat box. We have a Q&A session at the end to answer your questions. After the webinar, a short feedback survey will pop up on your screens. I'd really appreciate if you could give us a minute of your time to let us know how you felt the webinar went and what you learned. The recording will be shared with everyone tomorrow. So today I'm joined by Paul Stone. So Paul is our product strategist here at Flowforma. He's our go-to product expert. He's a founding member of the company, so you're in really capable hands today. So over the next 35 minutes or so, Paul has some really interesting information to share about the rise of the citizen developer. And Paul, I think you're going to share your best tips for how people can tackle that increased demand for digitalisation right now. So Paul, I suppose without further ado, I'll hand over to you.
Carried out some analysis and identified that 2/3 of people post-COVID are finding that their processes are broken. Processes that basically previously depended on paper transactions, where pieces of paper were passed between people within the organization, have broken now because paper is no longer a suitable medium to pass information between colleagues. So with this in mind, people are looking to digitally transform their business and introduce digital processes to keep their productivity at a high level during this difficult period where a lot of people are working from home and unable to carry out the processes and achieve the business goals that we previously did. So digital transformation is very high on the agenda, and people are looking to find out how they can transform. Many digital transformation programs in the past have moved slowly or failed to achieve their goals, and people are looking at why and what they can do to actually enable digital transformation in their business. And that's leading to people looking at the concept of using citizen developers. What people have identified is that they need more agility than ever to cope with all the changes that are being brought about by the COVID situation. So their goals are clear, but there's a lot to digitize, a lot of work to be done. And that work can't be done by the IT department or IT suppliers. There simply isn't enough time and resources to digitize at the pace that they need to digitize at to maintain their productivity, maintain their position in the marketplace. So we feel that in 2020, you'll see the rise of that citizen developer, where business people are building solutions, automated solutions to their business process problems, so that they can keep achieving the business goals at the same level that they did prior to COVID. Does that mean that IT are not involved? Absolutely not. IT are there providing that infrastructure for the citizen developers to work at, and they drive the technology standards and provide the guardrails to ensure that citizen developers can build solutions, but not pose any risk to the business, not increase the risk. In terms of the approach to citizen development, there are a lot of options out there at the moment. But one of the solutions that we found is that you need people in certain personas or certain roles within the team to guarantee successful citizen developer productivity. So first of all, you need to have those business experts in the business who understand the processes that are in the business at the moment. It's not necessary that all the processes are documented to a great level of detail. You simply have to have the experts who understand the business, who understand the processes and the people involved in those processes and how those business goals are achieved. You also need executive sponsorship. You have to have a champion in your organization who's able to basically promote the business developer approach and push the organization to adopt business development, adopt a citizen developers as producers of those solutions and push those solutions out to the business so that they're adopted. Because at the end of the day, when the citizen developer builds a solution, you actually achieve the savings and so on, the productivity increases by that solution being adopted. It's not actually the business developer building it, it's the adoption that's the key to generating the return on investment that you need. All of that has to have somebody controlling the activity. So if you were to give a business developer tool to 100 business developers in your organization and just said, get going, you're really exposing yourself to a lot of risk. You don't want to do that. You want to do it in a controlled manner. And we'll talk more about that as the presentation goes on. But you need a technology governor in place to govern the development of those solutions and act as a gatekeeper to ensure that the solutions are properly tested before they're put into production. Now, there are other roles in the organization as well. So for example, a change manager can help promote the executive sponsor promote the solutions within the organization, encourage adoption, and as I say, adoption is the real thing that delivers the benefits at the end of the day. You can also have a center of excellence composed of a process pro, a person who's familiar with designing processes, who can advise the business experts what the best approach is in terms of process design. And you can have a technology expert as well, who can advise the business experts on technical issues, for example, integration. So when you need to integrate your business developed solution with a back-end system, a technology expert can come in and help you. And typically the technology expert and the process pro, as I said, sit inside a center of excellence within the organization. They're a reference source for everybody who's basically building out those solutions. Now, in addition to that, you can have a customer experience pro, because a lot of the return that you can generate using digital solutions is by exposing those digital solutions outside of the organization to customers and suppliers. And the customer experience pro can ensure that that experience for those customers and suppliers is good and adds value to the whole relationship between you, your customers, and your suppliers. Finally, a GRC pro, general risk, basically that ensures that everything that you do in terms of business development is compliant. So for example, you're following GDPR standards and so on, so that person can minimize risk to the business out of the efforts of all the business developers. Okay, just to talk about the general approach, how to tackle the digitalization demand, because what we're finding is that the snowball has started rolling and that companies are really trying to digitize at pace and at scale. So in order to do that successfully, you have to develop a process automation culture within the business. So promote the whole idea of citizen developers and enable those citizen developers by providing them with the tools that they need to build out solutions. And then you have to find a champion who will push the whole concept out to the business as well, who will promote business development as a means to an end, and of course provide training to everybody involved to ensure that they can get access to training when they need it. So the thing about business developers is they don't have a whole lot of time. They need to be able to build out solutions quickly, and they need to be able to be trained up very quickly, so that they haven't got a whole lot of time to spend, let's say, on a week or two on a course to find out how to build out a solution. They have to be able to be trained within a day, you know, and start building that solution the following day. So, you know, you need a flexible training approach to ensure that all your business developers are prepared. Ultimately, you want to marry process improvement initiatives with process automation. So you probably have a process improvement initiative right now. You're documenting your processes, you're reviewing them, but you need to marry that with process automation, which is the delivery mechanism, right? So your business developers are delivering solutions that support the process improvements that you're making. And embrace IT governance. Well, basically, IT have to be the gatekeepers to ensure that, you know, the business developer solutions are up to standard are going to add value, are not going to generate more problems than they solve, and that work can be done by IT through a governance mechanism. And that's what we're going to talk about today in terms of a demonstration. We're going to show you how Flowforma manages manages governance of business developer solutions. So a little bit about that governance solution. Flowforma have built out a governance solution inside of their application that allows you to manage the deployment of Flowforma throughout your organization. And that management is carried out by IT. So you have a technical person, if you like, at the center of everything that's distributing Flowforma, that's installing applications, Flowforma applications throughout your organization and managing the interaction between those different environments and the different users of those environments. So for example, you might deploy a sandbox for a person in the finance department to build out some finance processes, and then the person in finance applies for those processes to be put into production. And they do that via IT, and they do it in a very automated way, which I'm going to show you in a moment, using our governance application. And the governance application and this approach enables those business users to test within their own individual sandbox without risking production environments, without posing major risk to the business. So citizen developers can build out flows and test processes before applying to IT to have them put into production. And this is a mirror of the type of activity that's carried out by IT pros when they're building out solutions. They build, they test, it goes into production when it passes the test. And this is what we do in our governance application. Okay, so let's jump into a demonstration of that governance app and show you how it would be used in real life. I'm just going to exit my presentation here and jump over to my Flowforma demo area. Okay, so what I'd like to do first of all is for everybody on the call, give people a quick demonstration of what Flowforma actually is. Flowforma is a tool that's designed for citizen developers to build out solutions, and those solutions are based on processes. So processes drive the business forward to achieve their business goals. It's a great way to promote digital transformation because everybody follows processes. Everybody needs to achieve those goals. So we use processes as a core element. When you install Flowforma, it installs inside your SharePoint environment. And what we're seeing here is Flowforma installed inside a SharePoint site. And we have some links on the page that kick off processes. So for example, when I click on this link here, as an end user, which I might be an end user here, I'm clicking on a link to initiate an employee onboarding process. This is what that process looks like. Flowforma uniquely links workflow and data and document management together in one tool, in one user interface. And so what we're seeing here is a process that's going to execute in a series of steps at the top. And down here, this is the data that's relevant to this particular step. So this is the end user view of the system. But we also have a no-code configuration tool. And this is what enables your business developers to build out solutions themselves without having a lot of IT knowledge. And a no-code tool is called a flow designer. A flow is basically a template for a process. So this is the template of the onboarding process that we just saw. And here we see the various steps in the process. Inside the steps, we see the detail of all the data that's captured on every step. And then we have things called business rules that carry out automatic actions, assisting the end user. So for example, you might want to send out an email, or you might want to loop the workflow around, or carry out an integration with a backend system, for example. There's lots and lots of business rules that you can add to automate the process and assist the end user in achieving their business goal. So that's what Flowforma looks like. And if you can imagine a business developer, so a business end user is normally going into this Flowforma site and they're running processes, they're filling out forms, they're carrying out tasks, completing tasks, and so on, while your business developers or citizen developers are going in and configuring these processes. That's all good, but if you were just using a single site, what would happen is that when you edit the processes here and you press save, the very next onboarding process that you run will have your changes in it. That's a good and a bad thing. The good thing is you can immediately affect your changes, but the bad thing is that if you made a mistake, that's immediately evident. So what you would ideally like to have is multiple environments where you can essentially edit your processes with the knowledge that you're not posing a risk to the business. You can test them out in your environment, and then you can move them into production. And now I'm going to introduce you to governance. So our governance application allows you to create multiple environments inside your organization. There's quite a lot of environments on this particular tenancy, and it also allows you to move processes between those environments. Now, this actually is the administrator's interface that I'm showing you here. Let's just jump over to another browser where I'm going to show you the end user interface. So imagine you're a person in the finance department or maybe in procurement, and you want to have a sandbox that you can play in to build out some digital processes. The way that works is that you go onto your governance page, which sits inside SharePoint, by the way, and it presents you with some options. So here I have an environments hub that lets me request new environments and see the status of my current environments. Each environment, by the way, is a Flowforma application sitting inside SharePoint that is independent of everything else. So when you create a new environment, what you're saying is, okay, I want to create a new environment. This is the purpose I want it for. Let's say I want a sandbox, and I want to be able to go in and go and create some new processes there. So what I can do is I can request a new environment. It pops up a form and asks me what the environment is going to be. Let's call this a finance area or test area. And then I'm going to pick a environment type. In this case, I want it to be test area, so that'll be user acceptance testing. Okay, testing. And down here, it asks me what security do I want to apply to this environment? Who do I want to have access to it? This is just a default setting, so I can set it up that I want, let's say, Paul Stone to have access to this environment, but I also want to add in another user. So let's put in test user. So I want test user also to have access to this. So let's add them in. And we can see here that you can add them in as an administrator and or a generic user as well, or a print viewer. These are the different roles within the system. So an administrator, for example, can create and process templates, flows. A generic user is just somebody who uses them. So you might add a test user in maybe just as a generic user, and you might add yourself in as the administrator. In this case, I'm just going to add everybody in as every role. And I press submit. And what happens is that finance test area request is then sent on to the governance administrator. So this is somebody in IT who's going to look at that request, assess it, and then approve it or reject it. So let's jump back over to my other browser where I'm logged in as the administrator. And what we'll see is if I just do a refresh, do all requests, what we'll see is I have a request now for the finance test area. It's UAT submitted by a test user who's logged in on the other session there. And you know what? I'm going to double click on that. And what it does then is it allows me to accept or reject it. So I can look at this request, look at the details of it. I didn't, when I put in the request, I didn't type in any rationale. So most likely my IT administrator is going to say, oh no, I'm not going to accept that. But for the purposes of our demonstration, I'll carry on. I'm going to say this is going to be accepted. And what we'll do is we'll press the accept button, and the system then asks me, okay, this new site this new application that's been requested, where am I going to put it? So I'm going to pick a site collection here, and we'll go for this one here, DPA demo. And the site I'm going to use, you know what, I'm going to create a brand new site for this. So finance test area. And what will happen is the system will automatically create a new site for me and install Flowforma in that site when I press the submit button. Now the actual installation process takes some time because it's creating a brand new site in SharePoint, and it's installing the application and so on. So this will go on for some time. So what I'm going to do is just jump ahead a little bit, and I'm going to show you process promotion. So while that's working away, let me jump back to my other session. And I'm going to jump over to the processes hub. So in this session, I'm logged in as that end user in finance, And you know what I want to do? I want to move one of my processes that I've been working on in a test area. I want to move it into production. So how do I do that? Well, I can jump into the Processes Hub and request a process promotion. When I request a process promotion, it asks me where do I want to move my process from, and where do I want to move it to. So in this case, what I'm going to do is pick a process in, let me see, where will I go? I'll go into DPA demo, construction process build, and the one I'm going to take is field change request, which is one I was working on earlier. And I'm going to move that to a new production environment. So the production environment will be construction demonstration, let's say, and construction production makes sense. Okay, so I'm moving it basically from my sandbox area into my production environment. When I press next, it generates another request. So you can see it up here, field change request, and the current status is submitted. Now, if I want to get, basically from my perspective, I've done my work. It now passes on to IT, and IT had to accept that. So if I jump back over again to my governance application, the administration mode, what I'm going to do now is look at the Processes Hub. Now I'm looking at it from an IT administrator perspective, and I'm going to check all the requests that I've received. And sure enough, here's my field change request come in from a test user. It's submitted, but you know what? I want to accept that and complete it. Now I already know where it's coming from and where they wanted to go to. So it's really just a case of, and I happen to miss out the rationale again. So you know what? I'm probably going to reject this, but for the purpose of the demo, we're going to accept. And I'll now press the accept button. You notice that I can also revert. So I can pass this back to the requester. It'll require me to enter in some comments, and it will email the requester saying, sorry, this is being rejected. But in this case, I'm happy to accept it. And it requests my credentials. And by the way, just for information, if you're doing this as an IT administrator, you do need to have a certain level of privileged access to the system. Obviously, what we're doing here is we're creating SharePoint sites, we're installing apps, we're transferring information between one site collection and another. As anybody who knows SharePoint out there, they'll understand that actually you need quite a level of privilege to do that. So this tool is really designed for IT administrators to carry out their work. Okay, so we press submit, and now it runs off and gets the field change request from my sandbox site and moves it across to my production site. Now, just so you know, let's have a quick look over here at that field change request. So this is the site I'm moving it from, construction process build. This is a field change request. It was built in an hour, just out of interest, and we actually have a separate webinar on our website that shows you that process being built, should you want to have a look. And it's a common process in construction. And what we're doing now is we're taking that field change request and we're copying it across into our production site. So if I jump back over to my IT site now, I just refresh the screen. And we see that the field change request has been moved. It's been completed. And if I want to see that field change request, I can just go to the site. So this is the construction production site that I wanted to move it to. We can see here that it's in construction production. And what we'll see is that if we look at the list of processes, choose from all processes, inside here, I have my field change request, okay? And if I kick that process off, you'll see that it's exactly the same as the process on the other site. So it's very easy to move processes between one site and another, but it's done in a controlled manner. So it's going via IT, and they're always acting as the gatekeeper, ensuring that process is correct and has been gone through the proper process of testing, for example. And if you want to add this icon to the screen, by the way, you just change the icons here, add in a process tile, and then we can just simply pick the new field change request process and add that in. So what we want is field change request, and let's pick a clipboard for that one. And there's our icon. So now we have basically a duplicate of the sandbox environment. And that's fundamentally how governance provides you with that mechanism of end users, citizen developers, having their own area where they can create the processes independently of their production environments, and then pass in requests so that IT administrators can, at the click of a button, move those processes on into different environments. And you can set up as many environments as you like, and you can go to whatever depth you want to do. So for example, you could have sandbox and production, or you could go sandbox, then UAT, then production. It's really entirely up to you. You can also grant people access to different environments as well, so that if you had a team of testers, for example, you could give those access to the test environment, and so on. So you can manage that, the access to the environments through the governance app as well. Now, that's the main function of the governance app in terms of citizen development. But what we might do is talk a little bit about the other functions in governance, because it doesn't just create environments, it doesn't just move processes, there's also additional features. One of the key things, I guess, is adoption. So when you look to deploy Flowforma on a larger scale within an organization, there are certain things that you'd want to have within control of IT. So one of the things would be, for example, having the ability to default the colors on all the forms, because you want to brand the sites that you're creating. So what you can do is you can, for example, set a step background color here to be a nice color of shade of blue, for example, and then you can automatically pass that out as the default color on all of these sites that I've selected, or indeed on all the sites in the system, in your tenancy. So you can make this a default on all the forms that you create. You can also have a default logo, apply that out as well, excuse me. And you can publish this theme so that basically all those sites are affected, and any new forms are created are using the latest branding. The other thing that you can do is you can manage those user groups. Probably the most common usage of this would be to remove a user. So let's say you have a user who's left the company, and you can basically select all of the sites on your tenancy, all the app deployments, and you can actually say, okay, I want to remove this person from all of the groups. And of course, you'd have to type in the username here and press the remove user button. It's automatically deleted from all of the sites. Another thing you can do is you can specifically remove that user from the administrator group, so that a user who previously used to be an administrator and had the ability to change flows, after doing this, they would have no ability to change flows. So this is a way that you can control the membership of groups within all of the apps that you've deployed, and you can actually change people's roles within the organization. So if you want to remove them as an administrator, you can do so very easily. You don't have to go into each app site and do it. So again, it's a tool for central IT control. You can also, of course, add users and replace users as well. So if people are changing roles, moving from one division to another division, you can replace them with their new replacement, for example. And you can select the divisional sites and so on that affects. Quite a useful feature. The other thing is customizations. So there are several customizations in Flowforma, and the audience may or may not be aware that Flowforma is a no-code tool, but there's plenty of add-ons available for it that are often built for specific industries, for example. An example of that there would be location. So the location question type is something that many companies use, but particularly in construction. So if you were a construction company adopting Flowforma as a platform, you could deploy the location question to all sites within your tenant, so that it's automatically there. People don't need to think about it, and they can simply use that location question again and again in the flows that they build. And there's lots of other options as well that you can deploy, and you can pick and choose which ones that you want to deploy. Then you can include that in your training program. So in a standard training program, for example, we probably wouldn't cover the location question, because it's specific to an industry-specific feature. So let's say you're deploying it in a construction organization, you could deploy the location question by default and update your training to actually reflect that, so it's covered in your training program. Now, we also have a couple of other features, and I'm just realizing I'm running short of time. However, very briefly, we have a licensing hub, and the licensing hub lets you maintain the licenses that have been applied to the various apps that you've deployed. So you might deploy an app and then decide actually you want to shut it down. You don't want to delete the content of the app. That's all your flows and your workflows. All you want to do is disable it. You can do that via licensing. So when we look at site licenses, we're seeing all the apps that have been deployed, and then you can just simply switch them on and off. You can do the same thing for users, and that's an interesting one because those users can be present, can have access to multiple sites. So let's say a person leaves the organization, you can find them here, and then you can actually say, okay, well, I'm going to remove that person, unlicense that person, and what it does is it unlicenses the person across the entire tenant. So no matter what sites they're in, they're automatically taken out of action. And when you do that, just so you know, it frees up that license for somebody else to use in the future. So as you uncheck these users, you're freeing up license slots that can be used by somebody else. We also have feature deployment. So this feature list will show you what features have been enabled. In this particular environment, I've enabled all the features. In your environment, you may not have, for example, our engage features enabled or so on. But as you enable more features, you can license more features and enable more features in your tenancy, and then those features will be available to use in every app that you deploy. We also have some usage reporting. Unfortunately, on this particular tenant, it's not enabled, but I'll just very, very quickly show you on one more tenant here what it would look like. And let me see if I can jump over here. There we go. So this is our usage reporting. And what it shows you is numbers of all the forms started and forms completed, steps completed, and so on. And it will show you, you can actually associate cost centers and departments with users, and you can see a breakdown of usage for each cost center and department. So the number of forms started, completed, and so on. So it's quite useful. You can vary the timescale of this as well, so that you can see all the forms done within a set time frame. And you can export this data to Excel. So it's very useful for doing things like cross-charging. If you want to cross-charge usage of Flowforma based on its actual usage, you can use this reporting tool to do that very quickly and easily.
Thanks, Paul. So Paul, I'm going to put you on the spot now with a few questions. It's from Samantha, and she's asking, like, would Flowforma governance help her to standardize processes across the business?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you can create a site, for example, that contains standard processes that you want to deploy into different departments. So you can create a site that would contain certain admin processes, for example, central admin processes that you just want to define, maybe by the HR department, and you want to deploy those HR processes into different sites across your tenancy. So Flowforma will support that. And at the moment, you're transferring those processes one by one, but we're actually releasing a utility that's going to allow you to transfer them in bulk, so that you can actually transfer and update those processes in bulk to, let's say, your divisional sites or your departmental sites. So yeah, absolutely, it supports the whole concept of process standardization.
Great, thanks for that, Paul. So final question then is from Daniel. I think this is a really good question. So Daniel's wondering, how can he identify these citizen developers within his business, Paul? Would you have any tips?
Yeah, that's a very different question. Yeah, it's a tricky one. And typically the organizations that we deploy Flowforma in, where they're deploying Flowforma as a platform, they don't have that many citizen developers. And the reason is that the work of one citizen developer is used by maybe 100 people in the business. and it's the adoption and usage that gets the return. So you don't have to have that many citizen developers in your organization. And people often wonder about that. Does that mean everybody's going to be a citizen developer? No, most people don't have the time. And while Flowforma is a very quick system to use, quick system to learn, still, if you take a day out of a business manager's routine, that's a significant commitment. So you have to find somebody who's going to have the time, who has often has some kind of personal interest in succeeding with this, and who the way I always say to people is, if that person can write down a process on a piece of paper, then they have enough knowledge to be able to digitize that process. If you can document the process, write it down in a way that somebody else can understand, then you'll have enough understanding of that process to be able to digitize it. You don't need to have a lot of technical knowledge at all, and the training cycle is very low. So sometimes we come up against people who are concerned about that. You know, not every business user is comfortable with the idea of, oh, building an IT system, that sounds like somebody else's job. That's going to be too hard. But we take them through a gentle training cycle. We actually have a program called Sure Start that literally handholds you through the building of your first process, and it converts everybody. So once somebody's been through that Sure Start process, they're sold on the idea, and they're fully capable as a citizen developer. So in answer to your question, who are the best citizen developers? It's really the people who have a bit of aptitude and have a personal interest in building solutions, who are going to get something out of it because they're going to achieve their business goals faster, or they're going to enable it, they're going to make the team more productive, for example. But don't be put off by the technical knowledge. You really don't need a lot of technical knowledge. Most important thing is understanding a process and being able to document it. If you can do that, you'll be able to digitize it.
Perfect, thanks Paul. They're great tips. So we haven't got to answer everyone's question, but don't worry, if your question hasn't been answered, we'll be back to you with an answer as soon as possible. So we're coming up to the end of our slot together. So what I'd like to do is thank everyone for joining us today. I have a few recommended next steps. So if you'd like to hear anything else about the content that was delivered today by Paul, feel free to pop over to our website, flowforma.com, fill in the contact us sheet, and we'll be back to you as soon as possible. So if you'd like a 14-day trial, if you'd like a one-to-one demo or consultation, just get in touch with us. So thanks everyone for joining. Keep safe, enjoy the rest of your day, and a short survey will pop up now. I'd really appreciate if you could take a few minutes to fill that out for us. So thanks for joining. Talk soon. Thanks, Paul.